My daughter demanded I sell my grandmother's necklace for her expensive college. I cut her off completely. But when she pushed her father's pregnant mistress, he threw her out too, and now she's begging for my forgiveness. I'm 45 years old. I work as a graphic designer from home, and honestly, I need to get this out, because what happened with my daughter Ava in the last few months still has me processing a ton of mixed emotions. The thing is, I never thought my relationship with her would get to this point. You know, to the point of not speaking, legal threats, seeing her face in viral TikTok videos calling me basically the worst mother in the world. But anyway, I guess I should start from the beginning so this whole mess makes sense. Ava is 19 now, and for most of her life we were super close. Or at least that's what I thought. I was always a present mother. I took her to her piano lessons, helped her with homework. We went to the movies together on Fridays. Her father, Daniel, was another story. Daniel is a businessman, always working, always busy, you know the type. I worked from home so I could be available for Ava. He worked until 9 or 10 at night, almost every day. At the time, I thought it was normal. That's just how things were when you have a business. Turns out for 5 years, 5 damn years, Daniel was having an affair with his secretary. 5 years where I was at home preparing dinners, helping with school projects, basically being a single mother but married, while he was building an entire parallel life with this woman. I found out like 2.5 years ago, right when Ava was 16. It was devastating, obviously. I'm not going to go into all the details of how I found out because it still hurts to think about it. But let's just say I found messages on his phone that left nothing to the imagination. The confrontation was horrible. He didn't even really deny it, just said he had fallen in love with her, that he'd been feeling disconnected from me for years, all the typical garbage cheaters say to justify themselves. I asked for a divorce immediately. I wasn't going to be one of those women who stays and pretends everything's fine. My lawyer was aggressive. We got a pretty fair settlement considering everything. Like I kept the house and he has to pay child support for Ava until she finishes college, plus other things. The divorce was hard on Ava, as you'd imagine. But what surprised me was how she reacted. Instead of being furious with her father for destroying our family, she started spending more time with him. And not just with him, but also with his girlfriend, the ex-secretary. At first I thought maybe it was her way of processing it, you know, trying to maintain a relationship with her dad despite everything. But over time I realized there was something else going on. This woman, the girlfriend, started cultivating this super close relationship with Ava. She'd take her shopping, buy her expensive things, invite her to fancy dinners, and Ava started to change, becoming more materialistic, more focused on appearances and superficial things. Fast forward a year after the divorce. Ava was applying to universities and we needed to talk about money. She wanted to go to this super expensive private university, like $60,000 a year or something. Crazy. She didn't get a scholarship. Her grades were good, but not exceptional. When I told her she needed to consider more economical options, or at least apply to more scholarships, she got furious. She told me I was selfish, that her father had money and that between the two of us we could easily pay for it. I explained that yes, between the two of us we could contribute, but that she also needed to be realistic about student debt and that maybe a state university would be more sensible. She didn't want to hear any of it. Things started getting really tense between us. There was this piano recital that was super important to her. She'd been practicing for months for this performance. The day of the recital, I had a meeting with an important client I'd been trying to land for months. One of those opportunities you can't pass up. I told Ava weeks in advance, told her I was going to try to arrive late, but that I might miss her part. She was upset, but said she understood. What I didn't know was that Daniel was also going to miss it. He didn't even tell her. He just didn't show up. When Ava called me after the recital, she was crying, devastated because neither of her parents had been there. And I tried to explain that I had warned her that there was a reason, but she just screamed that it was an excuse, that there were always excuses. Here's the part that still drives me crazy. Instead of being angry with her father, who didn't even have the decency to let her know he wasn't coming, Ava decided I was the villain. She threw in my face that I was always working, that I never had time for her, things that simply weren't true. I had spent 19 years putting her life before mine. But one event, one damn recital I couldn't attend because of work, and suddenly I'm the worst mother in the world. Her father fails constantly, and she justifies it. But I fail once and I'm unforgivable. I guess I should have seen the signs of what was coming there. A few weeks later, Ava came to my room and saw my sapphire necklace. It's a piece of jewelry that's been in my family for generations. My grandmother gave it to my mother. My mother gave it to me when I turned 21. It's a beautiful piece, with enormous sentimental value. Ava saw it and out of nowhere tells me, "You should sell that for my tuition." I froze. I told her that necklace was a family heirloom, that someday it would be hers, but that I wasn't going to sell it. She insisted, saying that if I really cared about her education, I'd sell the necklace. I explained that there were other ways to get money, that her father could contribute more, that she could work part-time, that we could look for more scholarships. But she just wanted me to sell my family inheritance because it was the easiest solution. When I said no, things exploded. She screamed at me that I was selfish, that I valued an old necklace more than her future, all kinds of hurtful things. I told her it was unfair for her to expect me to make that sacrifice when her father, who had much more money and who had also destroyed our family, wasn't being pressured to make similar sacrifices. That conversation ended with Ava packing her things and leaving to live with Daniel and his girlfriend. I'm not going to lie, that destroyed me. Watching my daughter pack up her life and choose to live with the man who betrayed us both, basically because I wouldn't sell my necklace, was like a punch to the gut. The following months were weird. Ava barely talked to me, only short and cold messages. Meanwhile, as I found out later through mutual friends, she was living the high life at her father's house. Expensive outings, designer clothes, weekend trips. Daniel's girlfriend, who was now pregnant, yes, because of course, treated Ava like a best friend. And Ava ate it up. It was like she was living in a bubble of luxury and superficiality, completely disconnected from reality. Then came high school graduation. A couple weeks before, I received an invitation via text. Not a formal invitation, just a message saying there was a party after the ceremony and I was invited to that. When I asked her about the ceremony itself, she told me there weren't enough tickets for everyone, and she had decided to give them to people who really supported her. I sat there reading that message over and over, trying to process that my daughter was excluding me from her graduation. I responded something cold, like, "Okay, let me know the party details," because honestly I didn't know what else to say without starting a fight. Graduation day was one of the worst of my life. I stayed home while knowing that somewhere my daughter was crossing the stage, receiving her diploma, and I wasn't there to see it. I cried most of the day. When it was time for the party, I got dressed up, put on a fake smile, and went. The party was at a fancy restaurant, of course, paid for by Daniel. When I arrived, Ava barely greeted me. She was surrounded by her friends and her father's pregnant girlfriend. I sat at a distant table, feeling completely out of place. But the worst came when the speeches started. Ava stood in front of everyone with a glass in her hand and started giving this emotional speech about gratitude. She talked about all the people who had supported her, who had been there for her, who had made this moment possible. She mentioned her father, her teachers, her friends, and this almost made me throw up. She especially thanked Daniel's girlfriend for being like a second mother to her, for giving her emotional support during difficult times. Not once did she mention my name. Not once did she acknowledge that I had been the one who raised her for 19 years, who was at every recital except one, who made her lunch every school day, who stayed up with her when she had nightmares as a child. Nothing. It was like I didn't exist. I sat there, trying to maintain my composure while everyone applauded her speech. People who knew our history looked at me with pity, which somehow was worse than indifference. When the speech ended, I got up and left without saying goodbye. I couldn't be there one more minute. I cried the whole way home, that kind of ugly crying where you can barely breathe. How did we get to this point? How did my daughter become someone capable of hurting me so deeply and so publicly? The next day, I got a call from George, Daniel's father and Ava's grandfather. George is 65 years old, owns a successful business, and has always been good to me, even after the divorce. In fact, I don't think he ever forgave Daniel for the affair. He told me we needed to talk and invited me to his office. When I arrived, he looked serious, almost sad. He told me that after the party, he had confronted Ava. He asked her directly why she hadn't given me credit in her speech, why she hadn't acknowledged everything I had done for her. According to George, Ava got defensive and said something about how I had chosen work over her, that I was never emotionally available, basically repeating all this twisted narrative she had built in her head. George told me that at that moment he pulled out some papers from his desk. They were legal documents to transfer one of his smaller but profitable companies to Ava's name, his graduation gift. He told me he looked at those papers, then looked at Ava, and simply tore them up in front of her. He told her he had planned to give her that company so she'd have a solid financial start in life, but that after seeing how she treated her mother, he realized Ava wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility or blessing. That she needed to learn about respect, gratitude, and consequences before receiving something like that. Ava apparently exploded, screamed at him that it was unfair, that everyone was against her. George told me what hurt him most was that Ava didn't show even a bit of remorse for how she had treated me. She was only angry about losing the gift. Then George looked at me and told me something that stuck with me. He said, "Don't pay for her college. I know it sounds harsh, but Ava needs a reality check. She needs to understand that actions have consequences and that she can't treat people like garbage and expect to get everything she wants." I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to keep being the mother I'd always been, who put her daughter first no matter what. But another part of me knew George was right. Ava had become manipulative, entitled, even cruel. And if I kept enabling that behavior, what kind of person would she become? I told George I needed to think about it. A few days later, I called Ava to try to have an honest conversation. The call started relatively calm. I told her we needed to talk about graduation, about our future, about everything. But she immediately got defensive. She started justifying the speech, saying she had only thanked the people who had been there for her recently, that I couldn't expect her to include me when I had missed her important recital. I reminded her that I had warned her weeks in advance about that recital, and that her father hadn't even bothered to let her know he wasn't going. She responded that at least her father was honest about his priorities, while I always pretended to be the perfect mother but failed when it mattered. That phrase made me explode. I told her she was a manipulative and ungrateful child, that I had spent 19 years sacrificing my life for her while her father was off cheating, and that the fact she couldn't see that showed how twisted her perspective was. I told her that if she really believed I was such a bad mother, maybe it was better we handled our relationship differently from now on, that I wasn't going to keep being her emotional punching bag. The conversation ended with her yelling at me and hanging up the phone. An hour later, I realized she had blocked me on all platforms: Instagram, WhatsApp, everything. I went like a week without hearing from her. Then George called me again. This time he sounded furious. He told me Ava had gone to see him, crying, saying that I had declined to go to her graduation, that I had told her I didn't want to see her, a completely fabricated story. George believed her at first and consoled her, but then something didn't add up and he decided to ask me directly. When I told him the truth, that Ava had excluded me from the ceremony and that I had gone to the party where she publicly ignored me, George was shocked. I showed him the text messages as proof. George told me that at that moment he made a decision. He told me we were going no contact with Ava until she was ready to take responsibility for her actions. He said he had worked too hard in his life to allow his granddaughter to become a manipulative liar, and that if that meant cutting her out of his life, temporarily to teach her a lesson, so be it. Honestly, I felt relieved to have his support, but also devastated because this meant completely cutting off my daughter. I thought things couldn't get worse. But oh, how wrong I was. Like 2 weeks after George and I decided on no contact, I started getting messages from friends and family asking me about some videos on TikTok. Turns out Ava had made a series of videos telling her version of the story, painting me as this abusive and negligent mother who had abandoned her. The videos went viral, like millions of views. In them, she cried in front of the camera talking about how her mother preferred an old necklace to her education, how she had excluded her from her own graduation, completely backwards from what happened, how she had been emotionally abusive for years. It was a nightmare. The comments were horrible. Thousands of people who didn't know me were calling me everything, saying I was the worst mother in the world. Some even threatened to dox me. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with messages from people confronting me, asking for explanations. Some clients even started questioning whether they wanted to keep working with me. My reputation was being destroyed publicly by my own daughter. George and I consulted with lawyers. They told us we technically had a defamation case, that Ava had made false statements that were damaging my reputation and my business. We decided to send her a cease and desist letter, threatening a lawsuit if she didn't take down the videos and make a public retraction. I thought that would scare her enough to make her stop. Instead, she made more videos, this time saying her terrible mother was threatening her legally to silence her. At that point, I decided I needed to tell my side of the story. I created my own account and posted a long video with screenshots of messages, photos of receipts showing everything I had paid for her over the years. The message where she told me there weren't enough tickets for graduation, everything. I didn't do it to destroy her. I did it to defend myself. And it worked. Like the narrative started to shift. People began questioning Ava's story. Some of her own friends commented that her version didn't match what they knew. But then something happened that no one saw coming. Ava and Daniel's pregnant girlfriend got into a fight at the house. I don't know exactly what happened or what they said to each other, but as I found out later, Ava pushed the woman. She pushed her while she was pregnant. The girlfriend fell onto a couch. She wasn't seriously hurt, but it easily could have been worse. Daniel came home right when it happened and completely lost his mind. He yelled at Ava, told her she was a psychopath. How dare she endanger his unborn baby? And then, in front of everyone, he told her he wanted her out of his house immediately. Ava called George crying hysterically, telling him what had happened. George went and picked her up, but told her very clearly that this didn't mean she was forgiven for everything else, that he simply wasn't going to leave her on the street. He set her up in one of his properties where she'd be alone and could think about her decisions. Meanwhile, Daniel called me for the first time in months. He sounded destroyed, told me he didn't know what Ava had become, that he had contributed to creating this monster by spoiling her and buying her love. He begged me to drop the defamation lawsuit threat, said he was willing to cut her completely out of his life, that his new family was his priority now and he couldn't have someone so toxic around his baby. Hearing Daniel basically discarding his daughter broke my heart, even after everything. Yes, Ava had done horrible things, but she was still my baby somewhere deep in my mind. I told him I'd talk to George about the lawsuit, but that I couldn't promise him anything. George and I met and decided to offer a deal. We'd drop the legal threat if Ava made a genuine public apology and took down all her defamatory videos. We also wanted her to attend therapy because she clearly needed professional help. Ava accepted the terms. She made a video crying, apologizing to me publicly, admitting she had lied about many things, that she had been manipulating the situation. She also declared she was cutting contact with her father and his girlfriend completely, that she had realized how toxic that environment was. It was weird watching that video. Like, part of me felt relief that she was finally taking some responsibility, but another part of me felt so tired of all the drama. The following weeks were calmer. Ava took out a student loan to pay for her university, got a part-time job near campus, and started therapy as part of the agreement. George told her he wasn't going to help her financially, beyond allowing her to live in his property for a while, that she needed to learn to fend for herself. I kept my distance. Honestly, still didn't know how to feel about everything. Like a month ago, Ava sent me a letter, a physical letter on paper because she still didn't want to unblock me digitally. In the letter, she wrote a longer and more personal apology than the public one. She specifically acknowledged things she had done wrong, how she had let both her father and his girlfriend manipulate her, how she had built this false narrative where I was the villain because it was easier than accepting that her father had destroyed our family. She said therapy was helping her see behavior patterns she had developed, that she realized how much damage she had caused. She didn't ask for immediate forgiveness or expect things to go back to normal. She just wanted me to know she was working on herself. I read that letter like 5 times, crying each time. Part of me wanted to run to her and hug her and tell her everything was okay. But the more mature part of me knew I needed to take things slowly, that real forgiveness takes time and that Ava needed to do the work of rebuilding trust, not just apologize with words. I sent her a letter back telling her I appreciated her honesty, that I forgave her but that we needed to rebuild our relationship slowly, with healthy boundaries. Now, like a month after all that, things are in a strange place. Ava and I talk occasionally, short and careful conversations. She sends me photos of her apartment near the university, tells me about her classes. I ask her about her therapy, about her work. It's all very superficial still, like we're learning to know each other again. George has also started talking to her more, though also with clear boundaries. Last week, Ava asked me if we could meet for coffee when she came to town. I told her yes, but that I wasn't ready for more than that yet. We met at a neutral coffee shop, talked for like an hour about random things, nothing too deep. At the end, when we were saying goodbye. She asked me if someday she could have a real relationship with me again, if someday I could trust her again. I honestly told her I didn't know, that I hoped so, but that it was going to take time, a lot of time. Driving back home that day, I realized that for the first time in months, I didn't feel completely destroyed. It still hurt. There was still this deep sadness about everything we'd lost, about the time we can't get back. But there was also something like hope. Small but there. Maybe Ava really was changing. Maybe with time and work we could rebuild something. It wouldn't be the same as before. It could never be after everything that happened. But maybe we could find something new, something more honest. I don't know what's going to happen. Some days I think I did the right thing, maintaining firm boundaries. Other days I wonder if I was too harsh. My therapist tells me the fact that I still question myself shows I care. That a mother who really didn't love her daughter wouldn't be struggling so much with these decisions. I guess she's right. At the end of the day, Ava is still my daughter, and as much as she hurt me, I can't just turn off that love. But I also learned that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is establish boundaries and let them face the consequences of their actions. George told me something a few weeks ago that stuck with me. He said, raising children is like planting trees, that sometimes they need to be painfully pruned so they can grow correctly, that if you let the branches become wild and directionless, the whole tree suffers. I don't know if Ava's going to grow correctly after all this pruning, but at least now she has a chance to do it. And that's all I can ask from this horrible situation. A chance for something good to come out of so much pain.